You are listening to the Cattle Call Podcast. This is the place where computer-aided design and drafting meets humor and practicality, with a touch of business acumen thrown in for fun. Jim and Rocco, the owners of Zentech Consultants, the premier U.S. technology consulting firm for architecture, engineering, construction, and manufacturing, discuss the fascinating world of CAD with some humor and some honesty. The Cattle Call Podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Cattle Call Podcast with Jim and Rocco from Zentech Consultants. I am Jim Coppinger, and with me, as always, is my partner. Really, Rocco?
Rocco Parisi. Thanks for joining us.
You know, you stepped all over my intro. Dude, totally wrong. Totally sad. You just got to step your game up, Rocco. We're going to have to kick you off the air. That's just the way it's going to have to be, man. All right, so today we have with us in the studio, I have a really special guest today. We have Mr. Todd Rodgers from Walter P. Moore here with us today. Todd is a civil and BIM expert with almost 3 decades of experience in this industry. He's on the board of directors for AUGI, and he's one of the editors for AUGI World Magazine. He also holds Autodesk Expert Elite accreditation. So thank you so much for being here with us today, Todd.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Well, you say that now, but you already see how badly we messed up the intro. Are you sure you're going to be glad in a little bit? All right. So
nothing a little beer won't fix.
Hey, there you go. You know what? It's beer o'clock somewhere. So
already.
All right. So Todd, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit more about your background in the design world?
Sure. I started out in civil engineering directly out of college. Got my associate's degree and luckily landed a job at a little firm here in Houston. Worked about 16 years in the industry and got a job as a CAD manager. And I lasted about 6 months, and I was just threw my hands in the air. I said, man, I am done with civil engineering, period.
I can't say as I blame you. It can get frustrating.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. So I ended up going to a Autodesk value-added reseller and worked for 10 years there. It used to be called Total CAD Systems, very popular little mom-pop firm. And from there, the industry started dissipating. So I was like, I better get out of here because the boss sold the company to Gray Tech. And I was like, man, I better get out while I can. So I went back into the production, and I've been at Walter P. Moore for a little over 2 years now and absolutely love it.
Nice. Yeah. We, all of us, Rocco and I at one time worked for Avar as well, and we saw that writing on the wall as those shops were closing down fast.
They are, man. Only the big ones are going to be around.
Now that's the way that they've shifted their business model, and obviously look at their share prices. It's working. So yeah. Can't argue with money, man. So
I sold my Autodesk shares last week.
There you go. And you're still here talking to us. You should be in Bermuda with those share prices.
Yeah, I know. I should have sold them today. They were the highest ever today.
It's amazing. All right. So, So today we're talking about BIM in the civil arena. And that's an area that, isn't generally thought of when most people are discussing BIM, right? For most of us, BIM, brings up visions of, architectural designs and steel structures and, mechanical ductwork and conflict resolution. We're definitely not envisioning, utilities and grading and site work when we discuss BIM. That's, and that's why we have Todd here today. Right? He's going to learn us all a good bit about how BIM is actually, used in the civil world and why it's important, right? And why we should be actively courting it in all of our projects. Okay, so that's the plan today.
And I'm going to be completely transparent.
Okay, good. I like transparent. It's good. Lay it out for the listeners. Let them know the truth.
Absolutely.
All right. So let's start with some background on BIM in the civil field, right? So how does BIM technology tie into the civil and survey worlds? And at a high level, what do you think are its key benefits?
So BIM's driven by the creation and exchange of relevant digital information through the life cycle of a built asset. So the benefits of the processes are usually augmented by the availability of accurate data. Mm-hmm. So, that's a quote unquote there, enabling the use of this robust data model in the design world is where a tighter connection between the GIS and BIM can play a central role.
Okay. All right. So in English, for those of us who are outside the industry, what does that mean?
So basically, you're getting all this huge data, right? And you got to find somewhere for it to live. You know, it can't just be here and there and here and there. You got to have one place for this to live, and it's got to talk to each other. And of course, you know, we'll get into more of that when we go through the list here. But yeah, if it's not talking to each other, it's out the window.
Right.
You know. So.
Right. So it's all about integrating, you know, like I said, the various components, right? Everything from, you know, the underground utilities, the existing site conditions, watersheds, and data, all the way up, like I said, through what people think of in the more traditional BIM model, shall we say,
Exactly.
in terms of architecture and so on.
GIS plays a huge role in this.
Okay.
You know, on the civil side. No, everybody else could care less about the GIS too.
Yeah, right. That's exactly it, right? It's the redheaded stepchild of the industry. Nobody cares about it, except for the civil guys,
Exactly.
and only when we need them. The rest of
That's
the time,
right.
we ignore them. They don't really exist. So
I know. It's amazing.
Okay. So, all right. So those are kind of the, you know, the good things, right? Right. The positives and what we can start to do. But we always like to add a little bit of, you know, like you said, the transparency and the honest struggle into this podcast, yes. Right? So, you know, what do you see as, you know, the biggest sticking points to working with BIM data in a civil-based environment, right? You know, what key concerns do our listeners really need to be on the lookout for? Again, you know, up at a high level for right now.
So just as a building designer needs to ensure that the plumbing doesn't conflict with the electrical work, us, the infrastructure designers, we got to make sure the design utilities based on proper depth requirement avoid conflict and stuff with each other. So we map pipes and underground utilities, real world data, and view it in 3D. Mm-hmm. You know, unlike take an architect, they're just drawing out in space. They could care less where this thing is.
Right. It'll land where it lands.
Exactly. We have to be in this real world coordinate down to the gnat's rear end, right? So, you know, this helps us find problems underground so we can adjust the plan to avoid the conflicts, anticipate what will uncover and accommodate our designs and timelines to fit, and modify and view surface designs to match building elevations. Mm-hmm. So as most of the world knows, just like Microsoft, Autodesk products do not talk well with each other.
They do not.
It's a complete struggle from day to day. Is workaround after workaround after workaround after workaround. You know, posting on the forums, you know, jumping on podcasts, for example. You know, it's a constant learning, you know, from our standpoint to get things to work the correct way.
Yeah. Hey, well, you listen. At least this way people listen to my podcast. They need some information, so it gives us a reason to show up in the morning. So that's a good thing.
There you go. There you go.
All right. So, yeah, and that actually ties in, you know, with what I've seen, right? So, you know, most of the BIM use that I've seen on the civil side has always been really closely tied to the GIS side. You know, in particular, like you're saying, you know, I've seen firms make really good use of BIM data as it relates to underground utilities, underground structures, telephone cab, things like that, right? And like you said, you know, the base idea is having your existing utilities reliably put into place, you know, even before your design begins, you know, so that you know exactly what you're tying into, what its capacity is, what areas do we need to avoid so we don't, you know, knock out the power grid for a 300 square mile area. That would be a bad thing.
That would be a bad thing.
Yeah, it would definitely be a bad thing. So, okay.
And, you know, your data's only as good as the person that created it. So you've got that to look at for too.
Oh yeah, you got to be careful about where you're getting it and what you're doing it, right?
Exactly.
Right, so you know, what can you tell us about the overall process then of working with BIM in relation to the GIS data, right? What are the pros and cons, and what are those key data sources, right, that you find most useful, right? Where are the trustworthy data sources that people can go to kind of get that existing information with a modicum of trust built in?
So the traditional view of this is through the life cycle of an asset in a sequential process, right? Mm-hmm. So the asset is planned, designed, constructed, and then maintained. So a more accurate representation flow of that data is one that is driving the integration of BIM with GIS. So it looks how the GIS and BIM data is used. So on the design side, architects and engineers typically have difficulty accessing, up-to-date GIS information for accurate context or current conditions.
Right.
They often discover problems with this data duplication and conflicting data because file-based workflows are used to exchange the data. So on the operational side, the GIS staff frequently deal with difficult workflows and significant data loss that occurs when converting BIM information into GIS data layers.
Okay. All right. So what is there anything out there that's really a really solid, workaround to get data that is, rationally up to date, or are we still kind of stuck in that mud of
Yes.
spinning our wheels and trying to translate it manually?
There is a workaround. It's called having a GIS department that puts in the information themselves.
There you go. Right. So you got to keep your localized GIS guys, right? Skilled set of workers in house to kind of vet the information.
Don't trust the municipality's data out there. I mean, it's good data to have and get a start from, but don't trust it because it's just thrown in there.
Hey, listen, at the end of the day, it's like all government institutions. How much trust do you really want to put in that? It's a fair statement.
Right. That is exactly right, because they're not getting fired.
That's it, right? That's it. There's a reason why the phrase is good enough for government work.
That's exactly it.
All right, so let's bring Rocco into the conversation here a little bit. So Rocco, does this topic ever even come up? When we're talking with our civil clients, I mean, do we have people who are actively asking about, how do we incorporate BIM data into our civil and GIS environments?
No, it doesn't. It hardly ever comes up, to be honest with you guys. But I wonder if it's because there's just not enough education or discussion around it. Right? Is that? Would you guys agree?
Absolutely, 100%.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, and that's really it. I mean, like you said, we said at the top of the show here that people don't normally tie BIM and civil work together. They just kind of ignore them. Those are two areas that don't normally blend, right? So they never even consider, looking to incorporate any GIS BIM data into their process, right? So Todd, then let's throw this back at you then. So what argument, all right, do you think that you can make that brings folks in the civil arena around to seriously considering this BIM incorporation into their daily design processes?
So that's a real simple answer. It's basically getting to the point of being required now. We are required to do BIM work on the Walmart home office that we're working on now.
Right.
So it was Walter P. Moore's very first, taste of this. Luckily, working for the VAR, I got to see a little bit of what was coming. And we didn't have to just jump into it blindsided. Because if that was the case, man, we would be hurting right now. Because this Walmart home office is incredible. I mean, it's like the Apple or the Google campus. It's huge. And it's really on the edge of innovation. It's a really cool project.
Okay. But,
we are required to do BIM with it.
Gotcha. So let me ask you this: Who laid out the requirement? Was it a requirement by the client, or was it a requirement based on local municipality and agency, or
it
both?
Was required by Walmart.
Okay. Yeah, and that's really a big thing. You're seeing more and more of that, particularly if you're doing large scale work like that. A lot of like the EU, and in Britain they have regulation that requires it, and that's
and you have to get certified.
Yeah. You have to have certification. You have to get it going. And there's already legislation in front of all 50 states at this point. And the federal government is considering it. All right. So this is not something,
UK's always been ahead of us in everything.
Always. Yeah. With things like that, they're absolutely, definitely a step ahead.
Indeed.
But I mean, like you said, right, this is the kind of thing that we're all going to have to do. It's coming down the road, whether you think it's important today or not, or if you go like, well, I don't want to bother with it today. I'll get to it when I have to. Yeah, that's going to be a little too late, right? Just like Todd was saying, the saving grace is that you had the ability and the capacity to get yourself comfortable with it before the big project demanded it. Because that's when you're in
Right.
a lot of trouble, when it's like, okay, I got to get things done and learn an entirely new process. That's never a good mix.
No. We were really fortunate, to work with a really good other firms like Gensler. Gensler we've worked with all the time, and they're super awesome at BIM. Um, Walmart did bring in a company named Willow that is strictly a BIM company
Mm-hmm.
that's helping. They're actually consuming all the data into the model. So that's what their responsibility is. They actually worked on the Microsoft place, and that's why Walmart wanted to hire them to head up the BIM process.
Okay, so they're just kind of like centralizing and vetting and clearing and integrating all the data from the various designers.
Correct. And I've got, all these offices, putting in their stuff that I have to upload to BIM 360. And when I look at it, I'm like, oh, gosh, guys, come on, man. This stuff's zero elevation. I can't upload it like this.
Uh-huh. That's not fun at all. All right.
No, sir.
All right. So I think at that point, I think this is a good place. We're going to take a break to hear from today's sponsor for the Cattle podcast. And we will be back in just a minute to learn more from Todd about the details of implementing BIM workflows in the civil workspace. You guys are listening to the Cattle Call podcast. Hey, do you work in the civil and survey field? Or maybe you're looking for a new career in this top-paying and ever-changing industry. The Zentex Civil Engineering Hub is here to help whatever your needs are. From basic civil concepts and CAD design to advanced engineering tools, Zentex Civil Engineering Hub has hundreds of hours of recorded training, best practice guides, even discussion and support boards to help you advance your civil career, and it's updated with more content every single week. So keep abreast of the latest industry news, who's hiring, new project announcements, and most of all, make yourself the most valuable civil professional you can be. Visit us at zentechcivilhub.learnworlds.com. That's ZENTEK civilhub.learnworlds.com, or just search for Zentex Civil Engineering Hub in any search engine. Zentex Civil Engineering Hub, the only design resource you're ever going to need. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Cattle Call podcast. All right, so we're back to with today's special guest, Todd Rodgers, and we're discussing the uses of BIM in the civil environment. And so far we've been talking about general concept, kind of the whys and the wherefores, if you will, about using BIM for civil work. For the second half of today's show, I'd like to get into some more specifics on how to actually implement some basic workflows to help you get where you're going with this. So, Todd, let me ask you this. Okay? So from a production standpoint, where can BIM really have an impact on civil projects, right? Where will it truly help save time and money? Because, let's face it, that's what businesses really want to know, especially in the current environment.
Well, as it is right now, it's costing us money, to be very truthful, because we're learning, and as you were saying earlier, us being the stepchild, we don't have the tools needed in our software to do this, in an efficient way. So until we can get a true plug-in, an app or something of the sorts that's automatically generated, it generates this data, then it's going to be a pain,
Okay.
By automating the object data, that's the key to success in our industry.
Right. So, all right. So you're finding that there's still just definite limitations, and you think it's not just a question of, like you said, you guys are still on a learning curve, right? Which there's always a learning curve, and there's a little loss of productivity on any new software. But you think that the software itself needs to step forward some more before it really becomes a permanent structure?
Absolutely. And the big step was when Autodesk and Esri, joined hands. That was a big step, but still yet, just up until this year, we weren't able to use BIM 360, and BIM 360 is the new platform for all this BIM technology.
Okay, and it had zero integration with Civil. Yeah, I know. I saw in the last release that was a big release, or a big upgrade that they were touting. Its tie into Civil 3D, and you can push all that up. But I guess on the GIS side, it's still light there. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. Well, you see that this is why we, like I said, we like to be transparent and honest, right? So I think that helps a lot to know that there are limitations still. And that's not a bad thing, right? Like we said, you have to get out ahead of the curve. You have to be on the leading edge in order to take your company to that next level, right? In order to win the big jobs, to get those big projects like you're dealing with now at Walter Moore. You got to have the technology. You have to have the learning, even if it means workarounds for right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
So all right, so
that's basically how we're getting by is with these small workarounds, but they're very time consuming.
Okay,
but that's our only choice.
Well, see, now there's for all of our big programming listeners out there, right? There's obviously a market here for someone who wants to get in and really tie in the GIS data and the BIM information to process through the civil world. All right, so there's definitely some growth potential there for you guys.
Now there is the new Project Explorer that Autodesk just acquired. I don't know if it's going to be helpful in this or not. I do know that my friend Steve Hill with Red Transit Consultants does do a lot of developing with apps and things that does help us, for example, in like renaming pipe runs and things of that nature, because it has to be named, correctly when it goes over to BIM. If not, you're going to have pipe 1 through pipe 5 gazillion. You don't know what's going on.
It's nuts. Even just in basic Civil 3D, that's a nightmare. I go through all the time. We do a lot of work, on the civil side and training people. And the first thing I do with pipe networks is I just start browbeating people going, look, please don't ever leave any standard Civil 3D name on anything. If I see alignment 37, someone's going to get hurt.
So, that's it. That's exactly what I'm saying. When it's pushed out to a BIM platform, it's just garbage.
Gotcha. All right, so it needs to definitely they need to up their game. Okay.
Yes.
So I guess you're kind of throwing a monkey wrench into my next question, right? I was going to ask you if could you walk us through the basics of BIM, all right, and how it actually helps teams and individuals, right? Where does it really help end users make their process easier? But it sounds like right now it's not going to really help the end user. I mean, I can definitely see it's going to help the company right now, but I don't know that from what you're saying that is going to help and be easier for the day-to-day use of the drafters and designers, is it?
Well, for teams, it's changed how their work's organized, so more people need to collaborate in earlier phases of the project. So pre-BIM projects were leaner in a way. So a few people did something, and then they handed the information over to the next person or organization. Now the collaboration's more intense in various phases, and it takes a lot of organizing so that the people not sitting unnecessarily in a meeting. So it's easier eliminating rework when a project gets to construction.
Gotcha. Okay. So
as a team.
As a team, not as an individual, as a team, right? So let me ask you this in terms of we were talking about earlier about the data and the accuracy of the data, and particularly if you're pulling it in from like some of the public data houses, right, and the data storage, from like the USGS and other places. Do you find that it's actually beneficial, even though it's not accurate and obviously it's not named correctly and it's not what you need for final BIM? But do you find that even just starting in the preliminary phase to at least have a general idea and a concept with data coming just from one of those public facilities, does it help or does it hurt more? Do you think?
It absolutely helps. I mean, it's crucial in a lot of things we do. For example, I'm constantly asked to obtain LiDAR for guys to do these feasibility studies, just so they can try to win a job, right? And it's easily pulled from InfoWorks. I don't even get it from, data sources online anymore. I get it directly from InfoWorks because it pulls from that source anyway.
Right.
And InfoWorks and Civil 3D right now talk to each other very good.
Yep.
That's about the only two that do.
That do, yes.
In my industry. So yeah, it's but yes, it's very crucial in our everyday work.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So yeah.
And then, later down in the road, you just swap out the good for the not per se the bad, but
the less accurate, the stuff that
the
hasn't been
less
vetted and
accurate. There
cleaned
you
by
go.
your GIS folks. There you go.
Thank you so
There
much.
you go. Okay, so Rocco, listen, I know this is a little bit on the technical side, right? It's not usually your purview, but do you see this as being important concepts for our civil listeners and clients? I mean, is this something that you think they'll be willing to consider implementing, or do you expect pushback, right? Because they're afraid of the BIM acronym and that it's not, it's too hard and too much to deal with?
Well, it's hugely important. I mean, it's definitely a topic that requires a lot of attention. But I think where the resistance might come up is around the limitations, right, in the technology. Some of the areas that Todd is pointing out.
Right.
I don't think they're necessarily afraid of BIM, because BIM is it as a concept, it's been out there for years, but it's mostly been on the architecture side. So I think it's going to take time and further advancements in the technology.
Okay. Yeah. Fair point. So
Agreed.
So Todd, how do we kind of address? I mean, obviously, like I said, like Rocco said, you pointed out some really important limitations of where the technology is right now. But I think we're all in agreement that it is where the industry needs to go. So how do we kind of address the concerns of people who, like you said, number one, see BIM as too complex of a tool for them, and number two, or listen to what we're saying here and say, well, it's not ready for prime time yet. There's still too much that has to be done on the GIS side and too much cleanup time. How do we convince people that it's actually important enough to put that effort in?
I say get on the boat or get left on the shore, so, convincing is another hurdle for sure. I mean, that's a huge hurdle. Other than being forced to use it in a project, I don't think there is a way to convince them to start using BIM yet.
Right. Yeah. So
there's nothing to show them that it actually works.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like you said. So you think the requirement of the industry is going to be the driving force here then?
I do, because, working for a reseller, as you guys know, there's a lot of smoke and mirrors. And until you start working with this in a real life, situation, then you start throwing your keyboard and, hitting monitor with it. It's
Yeah, no, and that's absolutely true. I mean, listen, we talk about that a lot in this podcast. Software resellers are in the business of reselling software, not helping you. That's not what they do. They're all about getting you to buy another seat or a new package. And that's really what we do try to address here, right? That there are legitimate concerns that people are going to have to work with to get through here, but it's going that way whether you want it to or not. The industry is going to require them, and it will get better. It's going to improve as we go, no doubt about it. But the early adopters are going to be the folks who have the best crack at getting those big projects, who are going to lead the way and get the money at the end of the day, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So that's just the way it has to do, right? It gives you it's a bonus add to your clients and your design partners when you're already integrating that data into your projects before they even have to demand it. But soon enough, within the next couple of years, they're all going to be demanding it, right?
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
So, okay.
And like I said, get on the boat or get left on the shore.
There you go. All right. So with that, all right, I'm going to ask you one last question before we wrap up here for today, Todd. So you kind of covered some of these, right? But what are the biggest real world challenges, all right, that our listeners are going to have to face when they're trying to integrate the BIM and the civil engineering? What are the hands-on big problems they're going to have to deal with?
The biggest, I think, would be the data exchange. Just to give you an example, I'm working on a project in InfoWorks, and I usually take that project from InfoWorks into a really cool visualization program called Twin Motion. Well, this thing was huge. It completely fried my laptop, so I had to get a new laptop. The new laptop works great. It handles it much better. So I would say the data exchange, machines that can handle this large data. So having the right tools for the job on hand. So you're going to have to spend money. You're going to have to spend money on other software. You're going to have to hire skilled BIM leaders.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, you're going to have to be with it and spend the money to make it happen.
Okay, fair.
And it's not going to be cheap. Yeah.
No, it's not. I mean, that's it. It's like anything else. There's an investment to be made here. And I think you make an excellent point. I hadn't even really considered it myself. But, we're talking about that much GIS data and that much BIM information being passed across, a civil site, which can be, hundreds of miles of project, thousands of square acres. You're talking about immense amounts of data and processing that has to happen. So
absolutely. And it's just crazy because we kind of work 24 hours a day because we have an office in India. So that data is just constantly being consumed,
just
24
chugging away.
hours a day.
Oof.
Yeah.
That's nuts. Okay, excellent. All right, so with that, I want to thank Todd for being here today, helping us out with such an important topic. And, I hope we haven't scared him off, right? And that, Todd, you'll consider coming back to visit with us again at some point in the future.
I would love to.
Excellent.
It's my pleasure being here with you guys, man. I appreciate you having me, and I look forward to another one of these for sure.
Outstanding. All right, so with that, I'm going to walk us out of here, and I'm going to say thank you all for listening. We'll catch you in the next podcast, and we'll talk to you next time on the Cattle Call Podcast. All right, everybody, today's Cattle Call was brought to you courtesy of Zentech Consultants. That's Rocco and I. Zentech Consultants works with design and manufacturing firms to help our clients purchase and implement the software that they need in these complex industries. We provide a single point of contact for clients to buy, develop, and learn the most vital software systems for your specific needs. Zentech strives to be your trusted technology partner from your initial needs all the way through long-term support and training for your entire staff. So Rocco, why don't you tell them how to reach out to Zentech?
All right, yeah, you can reach out to us through zentechconsultants.net. You can email us at sales@zentechconsultants.net. Or you could even call us, 866-824-4459.
Excellent. We look forward to hearing from you all.